Well guys, today I'm going to start the rebuild. I spent all morning getting these bearings off because I don't have a bearing splitter or a puller. So I actually went to AutoZone and they never heard of a bearing splitter or puller. I showed them a picture that was from the AutoZone website saying that they had it in the store. They still claimed that no such tool exists and they've never seen one and they don't have it and their site is wrong, which is kind of how it is when you go to AutoZone. Then I went to O'Reilly's and they didn't have one either. They'd never seen one or heard of one and denied its full existence. But he had a tie rod end puller and he was nice enough to pull this bearing off for me, which left me the back one. So I just came home and I cut it off with the Dremel. So I did not damage it in any way, but I cut it off with the Dremel. I just cut through the outer race and then I cut through the inner cage, and then I just kind of filed down either side of the inner race and just twisted it off with the vise. So I have some new parts to go on. I'm assuming 3 of the bearings are going to be the same, and then there's the one that's going to have the snap ring on it. I'm hoping I am correct in that assumption. Then you have the new seals and case gaskets and stuff like that. So let's get these opened up. Alright, to move the gear out of the way. Eventually I'm going to need to sweep in here because it's getting kind of dirty. I'm going to use my rather useful knife from Wish. Trying to open this up. Oh, that's that type of plastic that'll slice the living crap out of your hand if you're not careful. Yeah, so be very careful when opening this. In case you can't hear it over the fan, I have very disrespectful neighbors that have extremely loud stereo systems in their cars. So, yeah, something I'm going to have to deal with. 6203C3s, I got 3 of those, and then one 6203 NRC3, which I'm assuming is the snap ring one. This is the only one that's different. And I am correct in that assumption. Man, that looks great. Alright, well I'm going to close that up. I'm going to leave it in the little plastic bag. These 3, I need to get them opened up and get them in the oven at 350 degrees. This is the part that I do not look forward to, but I have a socket ready to go. I'm going to do this one first, pound that one on, and I'm going to turn it over and pound this one on. And then I will put the new seal and snap ring, since I broke the snap ring, like everybody does. Snap rings always break. Alright, this bearing is heated to 350 degrees. I chilled the counter gear shaft, so this should go together. And then when those equalize in temperature, it won't come off, because one will expand and one will contract. Okay, before I get too far ahead of myself, I need to flip this over. I need to go get the other bearing out of the oven, and we need to get this side put on. Get all the sediment off there. Oh my gosh, that just went right on. I'm not going to complain. I'm going to give it a tap just to make sure. Make sure it's completely seated. Once that cools, that's not going anywhere. Alright, taking some Type F automatic transmission fluid, which is the fluid I will be using, and a brush. I want to dip it in the transmission fluid. Get some oil down in those bearings. Alright, now that they're all oiled, I have to make sure to put this compression ring back in. Then the seal. Then one of these C-clips, I actually had to replace them Because it's kind of impossible to get them off without damaging them, at least on these, because the grooves are so dang deep. You have to stretch them really dang far. It's ridiculous. Alright, we got the first one on there. Actually, that's made a little bit nicer than the original one that was on it. Then I can take my drive sprockets. Hopefully it still fits. Yep, it does. And the last of the retaining clips. And then this is rebuilt. This part anyway. Then I have to start prepping the crank. Oh, there we go. Perfect. This is ready to go back in the engine case. You have to make sure that the channel, the open part of this compression ring faces up. What I can do is I can use this one as a guide to go ahead and get the bearings put on the crank and get it in here. So I can actually go ahead and lower it in. And again, my apologies for the fan. It's 90 degrees in this shop. There's no way I'm not having that fan on. Either that or you just don't get anything to watch. Alright, I can get started on getting the crank installed. It's just I can't put the clutch on. So, I have it laid in there the same way this one came out. Taper side goes out here where the flywheel goes. This is where the clutch goes. This is the gear that actually meshes up against the counter gear. So, I have to put the last remaining 6203C3 bearing right here. So I will heat that up and get that on. And then I have to heat up the other one, this guy right here, the 6203NRC3 goes on this side. But first I have to put the seal on this side. And I have to oil the seal before putting it on because I do not want to gull it. So I will take some 2-cycle oil, dip a brush in there, and just start brushing it on. So I do not want to rip the seal. That would be bad. Alright, and remember for this side, you have a thick step up right here. You have to use the seal that has the larger opening. Just pop it right on, make sure the opening side faces out. This is ready for this bearing on this side. I'm going to have to find a piece of pipe that I can use to drive this bearing on. A lot of people just use their seat post. Kind of don't want to have to pull the seat post off, but let me see. Do I have to heat this? Yeah, that is totally not going to go on there unless I heat it. Got to remember that the compression ring goes towards the outside. So I will go heat this up and the other one right here. Get these both ready to go on. And I'll be right back. Man, I just wanted to point out something I thought was hilarious. When trying to think of something to press this bearing on with, I thought of one socket in particular. This one. I have never had a use for this socket. Never. It's been in my toolbox for years. And it has never come in handy for anything. Until now. Because it fits. I'm going to use this to press the bearing on. That is awesome. Alright. I am glad I held on to this. I have my crank slightly chilled. The bearing with the retainer is on. And now I have to tap it to get it to seat. There it is. That's on. On to the next side. Flip it over. Bearing on. Man, That man just seated without my help. Let's make sure. Well, I got all the seals and the bearings on, and I only burnt my hand once. This is turning out to be pretty good. Hey, guess what? Fast forward 2 hours and I have built my own clutch puller. It actually took me like 15 minutes, but it took me 2 hours to get bored enough to make my own puller, and I pulled it out. We can say goodbye to this horrible hunk of crap. So, goodbye. Now, let's get the crank out of the engine. Just something satisfying about that, just opening it up. Kind of like when you first open a can of soda or something where it's like, you're like, oh, yes. Now I gotta put this retaining ring clip on. Put that on, it has to go in this freaking hole. I wish I owned a decent pair of ring clip pliers, but I don't. So, I get to fight it. Golly! I actually had to do it without the tool. I had to spread it open with my fingernails. Man, that was hard! Then, flat washer. Then, copper sleeve. Or brass sleeve, whatever this metal consists of. Then the bell housing. Then another flat washer. And then the last of these terrible, terrible ring clips that I hate so much. But this one has a tapered surface, so I should just be able to push it down. Well, there it is. It clipped in. It clipped in all the way, too. Wanted to make sure it did seat in all the way. Now, this is where I get to put in my Woodruff key, which I pulled out of my last crank. Hopefully it fits, as I have not had the best luck with Woodruff keys in the past. They are not my friend. Of course, I don't think they're anyone's friend, except for the inventor of the Woodruff key. Lining it up with the key. Yeah, it went in. Look at that. Now I can put this flat washer and this nut, which I believe this is supposed to be torqued down to 20 pounds. Hey, my disrespectful neighbor with the loud stereo's home. That I've asked 10 million times to stop blaring the stereo. Now, I need to put some ATF on here. I need to brush it on. So, I'm going to sit this carefully in place and get my ATF. Get a brush. Clean all the dirt off the brush. Brush some transmission fluid on here. Just for assembly. This is where I can put my clutch cover plate on. And this giant honking retaining ring, which is surprisingly easy to remove and put back in by hand. It's in, it's seated, it's assembled, it's torqued down because I torqued it on the bench, and the clutch works. So what this means is I can now put this in the engine and close it up. Yes. I don't have to put this in ever again. This is the last time. Get in there. And in a video I watched, they said to make sure that this compression channel, the opening, faces up. So I will do that, just because the video guy asked me to. Oh, look at that. It moves. It's beautiful. It's brand new. Now, I get to degrease all of the mating surfaces and put my gasket maker on there. And for my gasket, I have chosen Permatex Moto Seal, not just because it's cheap. It's easy to come by, because I don't have to search for it or order it. It was at AutoZone, and other people said it worked just as good as Yamabond or Honda Bond. So, we're going to find out. So, following the instructions, it says flange surfaces should be clean, dry, completely free of dirt, oil, or grease. Apply a continuous bead of Moto Seal. They did not give me a nozzle, so a continuous bead may be tricky. To both surfaces. Smooth material with a small brush and allow to set for 1 minute. Assemble the mating surfaces using normal torque specifications, which I believe is 6 pounds per bolt, which is amazing because it took a crap ton of torque to get them out. Allow 24 hours to cure to ensure proper seal. So, I'm going to clean these surfaces, I'm going to put on the Moto Seal, and I'm going to close the cases. And then I will resume the video when it's time to put the top end on. Man, I greatly look forward to getting this thing back in that bike so I can clean up my shop floor. This place is such a mess. Alright, I've got all of the bolts torqued down to spec. I have the clutch cover back on. I have the cylinder base gasket in and all 4 studs installed. And to do the clutch gasket and the cylinder base gasket, I used some Permatex high-tack gasket sealant. We just call this gasket cinch. That's good stuff. Now I can take the cylinder out of the box. Pull this up. Looks like they have not yet installed the rings. Ooh, and they haven't installed any of the studs either. Okay. And where the heck are my rings? Alright, have a piston. Arrow always points to the exhaust, so that's helpful. They put the ring in here. Man, I searched all over my garage thinking I had lost that sucker. And, man, they stuck it in there. I guess I need to try to push it out. Man, that is some sketchy place to put it. Alright, time to put the piston ring on. This is usually pretty nerve-wracking. You gotta find your peg. Well, this one actually encapsulates it. I've never seen one like that. But I need to get oil on this. So, I'm gonna take a 2-stroke and my brush from earlier. Dip it in the 2-stroke. We're gonna start oiling stuff, like the inside of the cylinder. I don't care if it's like heavily oiled, it needs to get done. It'll cook out of there later. Oil, lots of oil, all the way down on the piston skirts, in the channels where all the circlips go. Pull out the bag of circlips. Nice and oily. Oh boy. I always hate putting these on because they're so fragile. Just start at one end, no sudden movements, and that's it. That's in. So, I'm going to put one circlip in on one side, just so I only have to do this one time inside the motor. These little clips to hold the piston pin. Tell I've done this a ton of times. So then I can take the wrist pin for the piston, which is already oiled, so that's nice of them. They have a twisty tie through the needle bearing, which, I mean, they could have just thrown that in a bag, but whatever. This is also something that's going to need oiling, and lots of it. Get it nice and saturated. Make sure everything rolls nicely. It does. So I can put that back in the end of the con rod. take my piston, making sure that the arrow on the top is facing down. This is the bottom of the motor. There it goes. And then the last of the clips. Ooh, and I hate this part. I hate this part because if you accidentally drop it inside the engine, guess what? You got to take the engine apart. I think it went in. We're going to verify that with the flashlight though. Make sure it's all the way in that channel, which it is. Good. Then you make sure your gap lines up with the pin at the top of the piston. Bring your cylinder over. Lining up all 4 studs. Compress that ring. It's in. Taking my sanding sponge, I will now try to clean out all the gunk that's accumulated under the cylinder head. Just like that. Nice and clean. Well, it is finally that time. I got the wiring grommet all back in, the stand back on. Okay. Let's attempt to put this back in. Well, now there's not a bunch of dirt and rust holding it in place. It's actually not the easiest thing to hold with one hand, surprisingly. But it's in the bike. Well, I have actually been working for an additional hour and a half off camera. And not only is the engine completely bolted in, both chains are on, it's wired up, and it's ready to see if we have spark. I mean, I've waited to set up the camera because I want to catch this. So I really hope it has spark. Alright everyone, cross your fingers and wish me luck, because man, I hope this thing has spark. Here we go. Wait a minute, that looked like we had spark. Hang on, let me lower and zoom. Try that one more time. Oh, dude. Well, guys, I am exhausted. I've been out here all day. I'm covered in grease. I've got cuts all over my hands. But we almost have a running moped, or at least almost ready to attempt a test fire. Just as soon as I fix a little leak in the pipe. No big deal. But that is a project for tomorrow, because I'm going to get a shower and I'm going to bed after I address a few nasty wounds that I've accumulated reassembling this thing. So let me know what you think. Let me know, do you think it's going to run? Am I going to get my money back? I hope I do. I really hope I do, because I have a lot invested in it and a lot more than I'd really like to admit. So give me a like, subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you guys next time. Thanks for watching.